I had always wanted to be in business for myself. When I went to school, that was my goal. And I'm very grateful for the experience that I had at the shop to really get a handle on what the industry had to offer as opposed to, just what I learned in school. I ended up calling my professor and having her bring a couple of classes to my shop because I'm like, you have to open people's eyes to this. Like there's so many people that are going through the motions in school and they don't even realize the potential of, like microvellum engineer, what is that? And
Yeah.
nobody knows until you're in this industry. And if you love computers and you love, technology and you have a drive for that, you can do some really cool things in this industry.
Welcome to Verify Infield, the Millwork podcast. Your host, Jacob Edmond, CEO of Ductworks, will be interviewing experts in the industry to bring you insights and knowledge about the latest trends, techniques, and challenges in millwork. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the world of millwork. Here's Jacob.
Good morning, Adam. Thanks for joining me today and taking time out to come on the podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Today we have Adam Dirig. Adam, you're owner of Dirig Design, Advanced Dimensions. You're a Microvellum account manager. And I think you even have a company that sells bubble wrap. Serial entrepreneur of sorts, I'd guess. But I think to get started, if you wouldn't mind, if you give us a little bit of background about how you first got into millwork and then your journey to starting your own company.
Sure. So my dad was a carpenter and I used to hang out with him and build stuff with him. And when I was a kid, and then there were some projects that I wanted to work on that were a little bit more finer detail. And, he's a little bit more rough than I am. So I got him to kind of push me through those projects. And at about 15, I said, I think this could be a cool career to go down, and did some looking around and found out that the college right around the corner had a woodworking carpentry degree. And so I looked into that a little bit more and ended up going to a college called SUNY Delhi. So it's right at State University of New York.
Mm-hmm.
First year I did carpentry, and then the second year I did woodworking focus. So it's just a 2-year associates, but really fell in love with it. When I went to school, I hated hand planes. My dad used to sharpen his hand plane with a belt sander. I thought they were the worst things ever. And then I found out, well, actually, if you sharpen it well, it works really good. So I have a hand plane collection now just because of that. So it was really cool to just go through and get a feel for how the different tools worked. My ultimate goal was I wanted to be a furniture maker. I was like, this is, really cool. I think I could do this. And with all this education that we went through in Delhi, it was all kind of keyed into the furniture aspect of it, not necessarily the millwork aspect. And about 3 weeks before I was done with school, we got a letter from a former student, and they were a project manager at a millwork company right down the road from me. And it's still an operation. He actually is not the project manager anymore. He's the owner of the company. He bought it from the gentleman that started it. So I said, well, I don't know what this is. Let's go see what this might be. And I went for an interview, and they had machinery that I had never seen before. I was like, what the heck is this sliding table saw and a CNC machine? Didn't even realize that they existed, which is slightly sad considering I went to school for woodworking, but it kind of opened my eyes to the possibilities of what was out there. And I ended up getting a job there as just a builder. And I started building, commercial stuff, but did a lot of some custom items as well, but really kind of fell in love with it. And then I had taken AutoCAD in school and I really loved AutoCAD as well. And we had some issues, some stuff coming off the CNC machine. And I was a little like, this has got to be better than this. We have at the time, I think it was like a $750,000 machine. Now I think you can buy it for like $100,000, which is fun. But I'm like, this thing's got drills, it's got routers, it's got everything under the sun, and I'm getting square pieces out of it. And I have to put all my machining in. And it was like, this is weird. And so the gentleman that I was working under saw my potential and he said, Adam, I think you need to go into the office and start doing some programming. So I had a cabinet that I was working on. It took 16 hours to build one cabinet. We used to do medical cabinetry, and it was a hot lab for like a laboratory in a tractor trailer. It was kind of an interesting customer. But anyways, it took 16 hours to build this cabinet because it was laminated and it had all these dividers in it, had all these funky openings. And it took so long because I was finding all of this stuff and on my own instead of having the CNC do it. And so I said, well, let me start with this cabinet. And so I programmed everything to do with that, figured out how to use woodwork. We were using a Wiki machine. And I took that cabinet from, I think, 16 hours to like 8 right off the bat. And then I think by the time I was doing it a little bit further down the road, it was down to 6 hours. So I saw the potential of the CNC. I saw the potential of kind of that aspect of the business. And I really, again, fell in love with that. So I ended up taking over. It was me and another gentleman that were running the CNC department. And then I ended up figuring out shop drawings and figuring out that whole world. And I, really liked using AutoCAD. When I was cutting at the CNC machine, I read the AutoCAD book from cover to cover, the manual. It was like this. And like, what, let's just figure out what we can do, what I don't know. And surprisingly, there's a lot in those types of books that you don't know. And I ended up basically revamping a lot of that shop's. They had Microvellum sitting on a shelf. And this is kind of where I started my Microvellum journey. It was sitting on a shelf and I was like, well, I'm programming every part and piece in woodwork. We have a $30,000 program sitting on the shelf, running this really expensive machine. I'm like, something's missing here. So I said to my boss, I want to get trained on this software. I want to see what it's got. And so I went to a 4-day training course at the time. It was like a crash course back when there wasn't trainers and, people that had this was like their only job. So I got a little bit of an idea of how it worked. And then it took me the next 2 years to just kind of really dive into it. And thankfully now it's a whole lot better. But that was like AutoCAD on steroids. It was like, wait, I can do all this stuff in AutoCAD, get my drawings that I'm used to getting, and then send it to the CNC machine with like click of a button. And we were using version, I think it was 6 at the time. We ended up migrating to 6.7. But I really kind of introduced that into the shop and got a whole new routine in place, workflow, and I took over that department. Me and another gentleman. I was in charge of the custom, like commercial work, and he was in charge of we did a store line that he was focused on. But one of the things that really kind of opened my eyes to the potential, I worked at the shop for about 5 years, and close to the end, when I knew I was going to go start my own business, the gentleman I was working with in the CNC department, he had a medical emergency, and he ended up not coming into work on Monday. And like, where's Andy? And he was in a coma, and he was actually in a coma for a month, and I had to take over the whole department by myself.
Wow.
And I was able to, with ease. I mean, it's amazing, the confidence level that you have when you have good tools at your disposal. But I was like not working killer overtime, and I was able to just output for, I think we had about 20 guys in the shop, and I kept up with it while he was out. And then thankfully he recovered and came back to work, and it worked out well because that was about when I was leaving me. So, yeah, it was a fun journey to get, to where I was as far as starting business. But, I had always wanted to be in business for myself. When I went to school, that was my goal. And, I'm very grateful for the experience that I had at the shop to really get a handle on what the industry had to offer, as opposed to, just what I learned in school. I ended up calling my professor and having her bring, a couple of classes to my shop, because I'm like, you have to open people's eyes to this. Like, there's so many people that are going through the motions in school, and they don't even realize the potential of, like, Microvellum engineer. What is that? And nobody knows until you're in this industry. And if you love computers and you love, technology, and you have a drive for that, you can do some really cool things in this industry.
Yeah. Do you find that so you got one recapping? I want to come back to that last point you just made and drill into that. But so you said you spent about 5 years at this company. That's about 5 years out of college. So if my math is good, you're mid-20s, and you've got a degree in furniture or woodworking
and carpentry
and carpentry. Okay.
Yep.
And then you've got 5 years experience now at a millwork shop. It sounds like that did commercial millwork there, where you had experience as a builder, running a CNC department, then engineering, implementing and learning Microvellum. And then at that point you went out on your own to start what is now Dirig Design, I assume.
Yep. And so in 2009 is when I ended up leaving that company, and I wanted to start my own drafting company. I was trying to figure out, what can I do, what's available. And I said, well, let me just try drafting. At the time, I had no idea, what was going to happen. And so I went up to my boss, and my boss was a little, he would get upset sometimes and throw some things. He was a little like, you wanted to tiptoe around him sometimes. And I was sweating bullets, going, oh, I don't know, this is going to be fun. When I put in a month's notice, because I knew I was kind of a key aspect of the business. So I said, hey, Randy, I'm putting in my month's notice, and I just want to let you know. And he got up out of his desk, shook my hand, said, congratulations, this is fantastic. I started my own business, when I was young, and it was great. And so it was really encouraging to kind of have that kind of back, him backing me. And he said, well, do you mind if I ask what you're going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to do drafting and design. And he goes, well, can I hire you to do some of that for us? I said, yeah, that'd be great. So, I think I was making $15 at the time, just $15 an hour. And he goes, what's your hourly rate going to be? $25. So, I got a $10 raise in a second, and he was like, well, I'll hire you to do our programming. I'll hire you to do the drafting. And I ended up working kind of with them for a little while. And that was good, because it got me started. It got me kind of in the motion, owning a business, invoicing and all of that. But I was still kind of doing what I knew. But it was nice because it was my own schedule. So, that's kind of when it happened. And I did that for a while. I was on my own. I had gotten married in 2007. So, I was with my wife, and she was in a whole different industry. So, we were kind of just plugging along, and I can't remember what it was. I ended up bumping into some guy that was selling hardware. And I think I called him because I wanted to build a couple of cabinets on my own. And I said, hey, can you stop by? I had met him at RJ. I just want to talk to you about some hardware options. And he came over and he was like, "So what are you doing?" And I told him. And I think the next like several weeks, I got phone calls from every shop afterwards that he had basically gone to and talked. So that was a pretty cool bump. And then in 2011, we ended up moving. So my goal when I first started was now, do this for myself. I didn't really want any employees. Wasn't really interested in that. But in 2011, we bought a house that was it was a show room or a show house for a contracting company that had gone out of business. And that was a part of the other process that happened was 2008 is when everything tanked.
Yeah.
And I probably wouldn't have been laid off from my old job, but it got really tight for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And so 2008, 2009, 2010, we were still kind of in that limbo land. And then 2011, we bought this house and it came with a shop. And it was a really awesome opportunity. We knew the couple that had owned the construction company and they said, "We know you're looking for something." And we knew they were trying to sell something. And so it worked out well. But I knew that I was not going to be able to pay the bills if I didn't up the ante. So I kicked it into overdrive and I hired a couple employees. And that was right when the time that the market kind of took off. So everybody that did my job before had either been laid off or migrated to a different profession. And so that's when I really saw an uptick. And I met that man who did the hardware and it just kind of progressed that way. And Dirig Design, I was just going to say, and now we have like 10 drafters that are working with me.
Awesome. So, because I know there's guys listening to this that are in a similar, working as an engineer in a millwork shop or, on that cusp, or maybe have already started going out on their own. And I get this question a lot is like, how do you make that jump? And for you, you mentioned that you were always interested in starting your own business in general. And also it sounds like maybe it was at a time where the market was down, meaning like maybe things weren't crazy busy at work. But I assume that there's always some other driving factor. Did you feel that you were kind of at like hitting a ceiling as far as career development and learning? That combined with maybe just the intrigue and interest of like, hey, I really like this design and engineering and I want to do more of it. What was the motivation looking back on that now?
Yeah. Oh, good question. I think, I'd always wanted to have my own business. I liked being in control. That was one aspect of things. But looking back, I think it's one of those things where my area is not fantastic when it comes to opportunities. And
you're geographically where you are in the US.
Yeah, my geographic location. If I wanted to get a really good paying job, I'd probably have to drive an hour and a half, one way or the other. And so my family is here. My family is, a mile down the road. I grew up a mile down the road. My wife's family is here. We're having kids at the time. Like I want to stay close to family, but I want to do my thing. So essentially my motivation was I want a good job, but I want to stay in my area, in my location. And, that was a big drive. And thankfully at the time, my wife was working. And so it was before, when I first started Dirig Design, it was before we had kids. So my wife was working full time and we were in a situation where I could kind of take a step back and get a feel for how things worked. And she was kind of helping make that happen, which, in the long run worked out really well because now she's able to take some time and be with our sons. And, it's kind of nice how that ebb and flow works. And that was really the driving focus. Sorry.
Yeah, no. And I think, so that makes sense. And obviously this was in 2009. So it was working remote wasn't unheard of, but it wasn't like it is today.
No.
So that was, that alone, did that feel like a big, leap to, hey, I'm going to go start a company where I'm going to be working remote for companies?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was not a thing back then at all.
Especially in our
And
industry, I guess, probably.
no, not at all. But I was looking at it and I'm going, everything's in AutoCAD. Shop drawings are pretty straightforward. So why can't that be remote when I do PDF?
Right.
And then even with the Microvellum aspect, because I was still doing some of that work for, I used to work for, I'm like, in the end, I'm gonna walk away with NPR files and with PDFs for my guys on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a package that I created. So, I sat down, I had a conversation with the owner, and I said, look, it's all can be done. I don't need to be in the office to do any of this. And it was all, everybody I was working with was very understanding of it. They were like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Because in the end, the deliverables are the most important part. I think too, a lot of the trouble with working remote is if you don't have, that drive to like get stuff done. And I always had that drive. It was like, I'm setting my mind to this. I'm going to get this done. I would pull all-nighters a lot to get deadlines done. Deadlines were everything to me, still are. And so, that having that drive and being on your own is definitely a key aspect of success.
Do you feel like it was important that you had worked for, I assume, your first client, which was your past employer, right? Like that gave you the jump, but that he was willing to work with you remote, assuming that wasn't something he'd done before, because he knew that you had experience, not just engineering for him, but fabricating and building. You knew, like, because I think that's a lot of thing people struggle with now. Like even us, they hire us to do shop drawings, and it's like, well, you don't know how we build things. And how do I, even hiring engineers in house, it's like, well, yeah, they know CAD or they know Microvellum, but do they know how to build? Do you have firsthand experience? Do you feel like that experience that you had hands-on, one, was key to him trusting you to engineer, from a distance?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think that was a large aspect of me getting other clientele as well. It was like, hey, I could build anything you put in front of me. And that confidence, and even in conversations with people, you're talking through it, they get it, they're talking to you, they realize you kind of know what's going on. And that is a key factor, I think, in getting there. And it's funny because, I think over the years, we've worked for about 250 different companies across the United States and even outside of the United States. And, everybody builds differently. And that was a big challenge when I first started was, well, this is how I like to build things. And now you have to relearn how somebody else does it. But, once you get your mind wrapped around it, it's pretty straight.
Yeah. I think to some people listening, that might be a crazy number, thinking 250, because like before going out into this world where you're working for other companies, even for me, like I didn't even realize how many millworkers there are just in the US, how big this industry really is. And even that 250, that's still just a fraction of what's really out there, right? And did that, like, how rapidly did that world open up for you where you realize, the opportunity as well as just how massive this industry is and how broad it is?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think I really wasn't aware of it until I started going to trade shows. That's when I really started seeing, wait a minute, this is bigger than just, my area.
Yeah.
And that actually happened when I was doing the advanced dimensions side of things. I went to a couple of trade shows and I was displaying the products, but I think it was an IWF, in Georgia. And I was like looking around and this is a whole different world that I haven't touched. And, it's amazing. It's right now, it's especially like when I started in 2009, it was a good time because of the way everything worked. But right now it's almost at that together.
Yeah. So touching on that, you've got Dirig Design, which is basically everything we talked about today, where you went out on your own, and then since then, now you've got, you said like 10 or so people that work for you. And today, Dirig Design, you guys do shop drawings and drafting and design services mostly for millwork shops, I assume.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
We don't do anything else.
Okay.
Wall millwork shops. We have quite a bit on returning customers.
Yep.
And my third employee that I hired is the one who's running it now. So I find that, I'm very good at system building.
Mm-hmm.
So I build a system and then to be honest, build a system, it gets a little tedious after time. But I like that once that system is in place, I kind of pass it on to the next person. And so that's what I do with my drafting manager now. So thankfully, I'm not really involved in that drafting company at all. It's really run by him.
Mm-hmm.
The estimates, they do the projects. So that there's about 10 people doing that right now.
And then Advanced Dimensions is you are a dealer, distributor, partner of Leica, but you sell the lasers, as well as I believe you provide laser templating services.
Yeah. So I'll rewind a little bit and I'll kind of explain how that got started, because that was an interesting one as well. So part of my service for the shop drawings was, especially for my previous employer, was I wanted to go in the field and verify the measurements. So kind of good that we're on the Verifying Field podcast. So I would go and I bought a laser. I said, I don't have the funds to hire an employee to come help me at the time. So I bought an $800 laser. It was really a stretch for me at the time. A Leica Disto D8 is what it was.
That like one of the handhelds?
Handheld ones. Yep. You couldn't mount it on a tripod. It was a little clunky, but it was a good unit. But I went out in the field and I used that for everything. I had a lot of people who were like, what is this? Do you trust this thing? And I was getting fantastic results. I ended up doing like a match to match with one of the guys that I was with, and I, blew him out of the water as far as getting measurements done. He was using the tape measure, I was using mine. But what I noticed was I was in the field and people were like, what is that? And I would tell them and they would go buy it. And I said, I think there's more to this than just me, using it. I think I could probably sell these. So I reached out to Leica and I said, I'm a user. I think this might be good. The gentleman that was the rep for them came over to my business and basically had a conversation. He said, yeah, I think you could do good with this. And so I became a dealer for them. And then that kind of evolved. That was in 2012. And I want to say in 2013, I did my first trade show and it kind of exploded. So, the drafting exploded because I had a little display for the drafting, and the lasers exploded, and people were hiring me to go do the work, and, we're selling the units, and we still do that today. So we tend to only go to the projects that are a little bit more complicated, like curved hand railings and basically all the jobs that nobody else wants to do. We'll get those because we're really comfortable with equipment.
Right. Yeah. So that is, I believe that's where I first met you. Was I think I bought a 3D Disto from you when I was at Mortensen back 6 years ago now, something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'd rented one, and I think probably when I was researching them, I think I found your Advanced Dimensions website. And then through that, I found out you do Dirig Design. And I think we worked together on some jobs at that point as well on the Dirig Design side. But that was through lasers when we first. So 2014 was your first show, your first IWF show where you had a booth. Is that right?
Yeah. So actually in 2013, we did AWFS.
Oh, in Vegas. Okay. And then,
and then 2014 and did IWF. Yep.
So that's how you evolved into starting Advanced Dimensions. And it's interesting what you described, because I would describe myself very much the same way. As I like the process of creating the process. And whatever task I did myself, when I was engineer, I always made a process for it, even unconsciously sometimes, of like, okay, I need a system. And then once I got that down, I was like, all right, this is kind of boring. I've got a system now and let me evolve this. And so now as a business owner, it's the same thing. Okay, let me create a system. And then, okay, now I've got a system for bidding jobs and creating quotes and selling. Let me hire somebody to teach them how to do this. And then they develop, right? So you've done that now with that. You did advanced dimensions. Tell me about how Bubble Boy came along.
So that was kind of another interesting one. So I have a guy, when was that? So one of my best friends growing up, he was really always into business. We would sell candy from the school that I was in. And it was like, I would sell 10 boxes. He would sell like 100 boxes. Like he's kind of nuts. He's the kind of guy that can sell, snow and he bumped into me. I don't remember even why he was there. I think he ran a printing company, and he came over to my house. I think I was trying to get him to print something for me for the business. And I found out that the printing company was very good. Sorry. And I said, well, maybe you should come work for me for a couple of days a week. And then you can work for the printing company for a couple of days a week. And that'll kind of offset, things, and that you can still, do well. Basically do work full time and not have to be laid off or people. So he's like, all right, yeah, that'd be cool. So he came and he was helping me with the finances side of things. And then, he was coming to trade shows, helping me sell the distos. And he was more of a business. He went to school for business. And then what happened? And then he came to me one day. It was when we were a little bit bigger. I think I had 15 people working for me at the time. And he said, "They sound really strange, Adam, but we should buy a truckload of bubble." So he's like, it's gonna be like, I think it was $5,000 or $6,000 or something like that. I said, if you've got a good feeling about it, let's try it. And so we bought our first truckload, and
with the intention of selling it, or just
okay,
yeah,
with the intention of selling it. It was pretty much, let's figure out a good way to sell this. And so we saw a little bit of a demand for it, and it was kind of figuring out that system. And so we ended up selling that. And now we have 9 locations across the country, warehouses that have our bubble in it. And we actually have our lasers in there as well. So it's been beneficial for both on that. Sorry.
No, I'm just trying to make the jump with you, with your friend. I feel like there's got to be some other steps in here, that how you leap from him helping you with finances and advanced dimensions to the bubble wrap.
Yeah.
So one, I guess you guys are distributors of bubble wrap today. It sounds like, right? Is it like your own brand, or you're a distributor of another brand?
No, it's our brand. It's called American Bubble Boy.
Okay.
And it was just a fun name. Let's kind of figure out something fun. And we kind of firestormed the market with it. And with a lot of things now, you got to kind of play the Amazon game. It's, just how things roll. And so we kind of figured that out in the beginning, and that helped kind of jumpstart things to get to where we are right now.
And so somehow though, were you guys using bubble wrap to ship your products? No. What turned him on, or you on to, hey, bubble wrap is a product that people need, and that there's a business in this?
So it was totally him. He was just like researching one night and saw some trends and said, I think this might have some potential. And we started that conversation. For me, it was really just the investment. I trusted, he's my best friend since I was like 2.
Yeah.
So, we've trusted each other very much. And that's basically what it was. I said, well, I trust you. I know that you're really good at sales, and then you make this work. And it's been a very, very interesting process. But, the last couple of years, we're opening new facilities, probably 3 facilities a year for the last 4 or 5 years or so. 9 facilities or whatever that is, 3 years.
So,
before you.
is it something that like now that the Amazon, the like online sales has taken off, all that stuff needs to be shipped? Is that where the business
Yeah.
has kind of grown along with that trend?
Yeah. It's kind of nice because, everything's about shipping time, right?
Mhm.
Everything time. So you order today, you want it tomorrow concept. And Amazon's pushing for the 2-day, 1-day delivery. So we strategically set up our warehouses in locations that would give us pretty much a one day turnaround, only in some locations, 2-day turnaround for all of our products. And one of the goals in that was for the lasers. We said, we can incorporate, in my mind, it was like, we can incorporate that thought process for lasers as well as for bubble wrap. And we sell some other packaging tools now. And that was really what the goal was. And yeah, it's nice to be able to go to a trade show and talk to somebody from California and they say, well, if I get this laser here, when am I going to have it? More, so that's been a good thing for all, it's, so with Dirig Design and Advanced Dimensions, everything kind of played off of each other.
Right.
I sell a 3D distro to a customer and they'd be like, well, wait, you do drafting services? And yeah, we do. Or we'd be working and doing drafting services. And I said, well, I can come out and do a field survey for you. And so those worked really well hand in hand. The bubble just added the volume that we needed to be able to establish more locations. But now that we have those more locations, it's also playing back to, the sales aspect of the advanced solution. So everything still kind of coordinates with each other. It's just a little bit off.
Yeah. So somewhere in all of this, you found time to become a Microvellum account manager as well.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how that got started and what that looks like today?
Sure. Yeah. No. Good question. So basically, I was doing this was it was back in 2017. Yeah, I was kind of like ramping up my trade show content. I was seeing good success with IWF, good success with AWFS. And I was like, I want to do more trade shows. I think there's more potential out there to get our name out there. And at the time, we were not quite, we weren't selling as many lasers as we are today. So, in that, I went to the Kitchen and Bath show, KBIS in Orlando. And I'm walking through and I had to use Microvellum at the old job. And then a couple of years afterwards, kind of doing that engineering, but I had fallen away from Microvellum and just focused more on things. I was doing a lot with Autolist per team, just the customization, like I said, the setup system. And so I had this, and I'm sure, you heard this before, but I kind of had a love-hate relationship with Microvellum because at the time I wasn't really too keen on, the way it was being promoted. And I loved the software. It had done so fantastic for what I was working on. But it was just kind of, a little oversold in my opinion. And so I bumped into Clay at the KBIS show. They had a booth. And I hadn't seen him before. I actually think he had done some tech support calls for me way back when. And I just kind of struck up a conversation with Clay and found out that they were kind of switching over to an internal team of people versus working with an outside company. And I told him about my drafting, told him about the lasers, and he just kind of looked at me and said, you might be a good fit for us in the New England area because they didn't have anybody in this area. So I think the closest one was like in Virginia or something like that. So he said, maybe you should come out to like, I think it was TechCon. It was one of the first ones I want to say. He goes, come out to TechCon and talk, just see what's here. And maybe this could be something for you. And it's kind of interesting, at the time, in business, right? You're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And sometimes that can go to people's heads. And it was a little, 2017, it was going to my head a little bit. And so I was like, sure, I'll take a trip out to Oregon with my wife and just see what this is all about. And so we went out there and I sat down with David. I was kind of right when he was taking over. I sat down with Michael Jacobs, who used to run the sales team. And they were just like, hey, I think you could be a good fit. Maybe you could, represent us here and there and, do a couple demos. I said, yeah, I like Microvellum. I think we should probably do something like that. And so it kind of started out slow.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was over the next year or so, it kind of brought me back down to earth, to be honest with you. And that's what I really kind of fell in love with. I'm talking to shops, I'm talking to people who are having trouble. I know, I've experienced the same situation. I was programming everything part by part in woodwork.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, there's no need to do that with Microvellum, and I love AutoCAD. I love, that aspect of things. And so I basically set up a system for the advanced dimension side of things. And I have somebody who's running that. I set up my system for the drafting. Somebody's running that. Bubble's running on its own. And they said, well, this is an endeavor that I can test out and see what it's like. And it's been really fun over the last, 5 years.
So it sounds like it brought you back to problem solving and kind of helping people and getting back to ultimately what are your core customers from your other businesses, it sounds like.
Exactly.
But helping them in a hands-on way, and also, the kind of what you're good at, which is creating systems and problem solving with things that you've got experience with. So today, is that what you spend most of your time doing, is being an account manager?
Yep. So today, with the exception of a few, maybe a field survey here or there, or, like a demonstration or a training with the lasers, that's my main focus. Yeah, I'd say probably 90% of my day is focused on that. So, which is good because, it's with all the other aspects, there seemed to be like a, not a monotony, but like, there was like a set system or a set way that you think about it. And that was it. With the account management role, every day is a different day. One day you're talking to a shop saying, showing them how Microvellum can improve what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And another day you're, helping a customer connect their tool, to get their tool farm situated or something like that. So I've been able to meet a lot of people, meet a lot of shops, I have a love for seeing how shops are set up too. Efficiencies are one of the things that I really like. And so that's been really cool to be able to get to see, different companies and the way they're set up and kind of glean from that.
Right.
But yeah, I love the problem solving aspect, and I love, it's like I've experienced both sides of the story. And so when you meet the person who's just experienced the hard side of the story,
Right.
it's really an exciting role to be able to explain to them and to show them the potential that they have. And I think one of the most fulfilling parts of that is just kind of, you can see it in people's eyes when they kind of get the fire of like, wait a minute, this could be revolutionary. And that's been the really exciting part.
Right.
Of the account side of things.
Awesome. So there's no, like truckload of roofing nail washers or some other business idea in the background coming?
Yeah. So, with the bubble wrap side of things, we are actually getting some more products. I think last couple months ago we released, tape. It's all kind of packaging material. So that business is kind of humming on its own. Um, I I think someday I might come back to the thought of maybe building a couple pieces of furniture.
Yeah.
Well, that's something I wanted to do, when I first was doing everything. And it's funny, my first boss, I talked to him and he went to the School of the Redwoods. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a pretty prestigious woodworking school in California. And he was like, Adam, you're never going to make any money building furniture. And he's like, I tried it for years. I couldn't put food on the table. And that's why I started this millwork company. And at the time I took it to heart and I said, thanks for the advice. And, I went on my merry way with my career. But, in the long run, if everything else is humming and that's not really something I have to worry about,
Yeah.
yes, sir, paying the bills with, it would be fun to do a little bit of furniture. Just to kind of keep it.
You talk about a little bit, this is something I'm curious, so entrepreneur to entrepreneur, I'm much younger in my journey than you are. But I find that a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners, kind of become what some people would call serial entrepreneurs. And I think that people who haven't started a business, that probably seems so strange or foreign, right? And like,
Yeah.
oh, well, what, is it like, is it an addiction? Is it boredom? Is it whatever? But once you get into it and you kind of describe some of this, there's a lot of synergy and a lot of things that it's like, oh, well, I've gone through the minutia and kind of gotten the ball rolling of creating one business. There's a lot that you learn from that you're like, oh, well, now that I've figured out this, I can see other opportunities to one, I've already done a lot of the hard work. I've set up a business entity. I've figured out how to do accounting. I've figured out how to do, like, a lot of that stuff translates to any business, right? And then really what any business ultimately is getting paid to solve a problem for somebody else. That problem might be, I need bubble wrap, you have it and I can buy it. It might be, I need chop drawings, you provide the service, right? Whether you're selling something, a service or a physical good, you're solving a problem in some way in exchange for money, right? But whatever that is, that problem that you're solving, like, I think naturally a lot of times serial entrepreneurs are really just problem solvers. And once you're good at problem solving and creating systems, it's like, okay, now what is the next thing? And you see an opportunity. It's not so much like, I think a lot of people also see it as like a greediness for money. Like, oh, I just need more money, right? And it is, if anything, not that. It's like, because you could probably on any one of these make a good living and be fine on any one of these businesses, right?
Yeah.
But there is actual satisfaction, one, in problem solving and creating these, and two, you are creating opportunities for your employees and other people. But I think more than that, it's just there is something that, and maybe I'm self diagnosing a little bit here, but I think sometimes we see problems and we can't help ourselves of like, oh, well, I think I could solve that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what I've always had in the back of my mind is problem solving. I love problems. And I think that's been a big aspect. I think another thing in the back of my mind for the business that I've set up too is my previous employer. He kind of had all of his eggs in one basket for a particular customer that we were working for.
Mm-hmm.
And that customer all of a sudden went poof and they were gone. And that was part of the problem with 2008.
And his basket didn't have bubble wrap in it.
Yeah. And so when I started my business, I said, you know what? In the end, I want to diversify as much as possible so that when bubble is up, maybe drafting is down, or drafting is up and bubble is down. And that aspect of everything and the lasers as well, that's been really key. That's been key to the success of Wall.
Right.
And I've seen that unfold quite well in the sense that, I'm necessarily worried about one thing going away or not. It's just, they're all kind of working in harmony.
Yeah.
But I do like solving. So, and the new ventures are like, like, I'll be completely honest with you with the furniture aspect. My wife wants new dressers, and we have IKEA dressers from 15, 20 years ago. They're awful. And, we're looking at these nice dressers and they're like $6,000 or something. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I can buy a pallet, I can buy a bunk of porcelain white oak for $6,000, and I can make 15 dressers and I'll sell them all for, I'll keep 2 of them and I'll sell the other 13 and we'll make a profit. I mean, that's part of the aspect of the entrepreneurial thought is like, well,
you naturally start to think in scale, right? And it's like, okay, how can I, one, make this more beneficial for me and offset the cost, right? But but you seem like somebody who's disciplined enough to actually execute that, whereas I would start that off and then I would just spend $12,000 and end up with a $5,000 dresser that I spent.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that, once you get the jigs and the fixtures, it's really kind of making repetitive cuts. So, I ended up buying some machinery just a couple of weeks ago, just simple stuff, nothing too crazy. And, I have a little shop right now. It's always been my personal shop, and now I'm kind of taking it to the next level.
Yeah.
But to me, I think there is something to be said of just kind of taking a step back and actually do some work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a time where you can clear your mind. It's a time where you can kind of think about other aspects of the business that I could make better, when you're just doing kind of the run of the mill type work. So in my experience, it's one of those things where, it's a benefit for all aspects of the business for me to kind of take a step back and just do some mundane stuff. And that's kind of what my thought was with this furniture side. Like, hey, we can do this, 2 nights a week or something like that. And I have 3 sons, and, incorporate them into some of this too, so they can get a feel for how to work with wood a little bit more than they have now. And part of the trouble with doing everything on computers, I'm sure you've experienced this too, is sometimes you get to the point where you're like, yes, I have some really cool projects that I've worked on. We have some really cool PDFs of all the drawings that we've done, or, the connections that I have with Microvellum. But there is an aspect at the end of the day where when you get your hand involved in something.
Yeah, having something physical, which is interesting, having something tangible and physical to show for your efforts, right? Which to me was one of the biggest things that drew me to millwork. Because I went to school for architecture and I worked a little bit as an intern architect, and always was frustrated because so much of it was conceptual. Or even when I was working as an intern, I would do these projects for clients, but I would never see the finished product. Mm-hmm. And it would be like, oh, we did this design of a house or whatever. But getting into millwork, it was like, okay, today I'm designing something and drawing it, and next week it's being built, and then the week after that it's being used, right? And there's like that more rapid progression, but also everything that we detail in millwork has a purpose and is going in to be used, right? But then when your whole business or your whole career is just the design side of it, you're not the one physically making anymore. It is hard, because I used to say there would be days where I was doing library development or something for my team, and I would figure something out, and I always like, you have those moments where you're like, man, I just made this spec group or this product do this thing that I've been struggling with, and I feel like a ninja, is what I used to tell people. But it's like so hard to share that with somebody who doesn't understand it or they can't see it, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, you don't understand how complex this is and how cool this is. But when you build a piece of furniture, other people can appreciate the efforts of your work.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why I got into the field survey work too, because it was like, I'm going in, I'm seeing the field, talking to people, and, there's a certain level of satisfaction. So yeah, totally. That's kind of the thought process behind, some of the newer aspects I want to work on next.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we've gone through kind of your entire journey. I mean, in a very high level overview, but which there is a lot to drill into there. But there's two questions I like to ask every guest before I end. And the first is, what changes do you see taking place in our industry over the next 5 to 10 years? What do you see changing in millwork?
Yeah, no, it's funny. Millwork is one of those industries that, if you take a step back, is anything really changing? So,
Yeah.
you go into some shops and you're like, wow, that's, there's some old techniques that are still being used. But I think one of the things that I, have been seeing more and more recently is kind of the robotics aspect. People are getting their feet into the CNC concept and that side. But now, unfortunately, there's a lack of people that are willing to work, or there's a hole in the industry of skilled people, and so I think a lot of people are starting to think like, well, geez, if I could get a robot to do this, then maybe it will, free me up enough time to be able to focus in on these more skilled positions that I can't fill.
Right.
I think that's something that, over the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be a little bit more prevalent. I think the software aspect, Microvellum is getting, like I was saying early on, it took me like 2 years to really drill in and figure out what was going on with Microvellum. And now people are up and running so much faster, and they're opened up to the opportunity of the automation you can get from that. And I think there's a lot of people who are going to be migrating over to that concept over the next 5 to 10 years. I think there's a lot of good foundational work that's been put in. And, I say that with Microvellum, as the software, but other softwares are doing it as well. But I mean, Microvellum's the best in the industry. So yeah. It's just one of those things. If I wasn't in charge of selling it, I'd still say the same thing. That's the way that I think. And so, yeah, I think the automation things, I think the robotics things is going to see kind of explode in the next years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think definitely as a lot of, there's plenty that people would like to debate about, that. But I think the reality is there is a very rapidly occurring labor shortage in the industry, which is driving that. So from a business owner standpoint, it's somebody has to run these machines, somebody has to cut the parts, somebody has to do this stuff, and there's less and less people to do that. And there's more and more of a shortage of the higher skilled stuff that we can't automate yet. And so it's okay, if I know I need people to be able to do those bench builds, those highly custom fabrication things. And I'm only hiring so many people. There's only so many people that want to come work in a millwork shop. The more that I can automate, the more I can invest in the people that are here to be able to do those higher skilled tasks, which only opens up more things, from a millwork engineering standpoint. My kind of goal when I was engineering, and especially using Microvellum and stuff, was okay. If I can tell a machine, it's easier and more consistent if I can tell a machine to do it than a person. Because with a person, I have to deal with, okay, are they interpreting my instructions correctly? Did they read the drawing, or did they just do what they thought I was supposed to do, right? Whereas if I can tell a machine, I know the result is going to be. And so the more automation, the more consistent results you can ultimately rely on.
So, yeah, no, I think there's a lot of power in the automation things. I was just going to say, I bumped into a gentleman at a recent trade show. And, you always talk to people, and it's really cool to just hear kind of like this, to hear people's stories, to kind of get the feel for the steps that they made and kind of where they are in life. And so I'm talking to this one guy and we're like, okay, what kind of business do you have? He goes, oh, pretty small commercial shop, commercial, we do some high residential. Is how many people? And he's like, oh, it's just me. I'm like, oh, really? And then he said, yeah, we're pretty automated. I'm like, well, how much do you do? And he goes, oh, we do like 750 out of 1,000 a year. Holy cow. So this guy had figured out a system and an automated process. He had a CNC machine, he had an edge manual, he had everything, but he was outputting $750,000 a year by himself with his shop. And I was, you hear these shops that do 4 or 5 million and they're impressive, but then you find, there's like 50 people or something running. And this guy's doing 750 all by himself. So that was, those are like those eye-opening moments that you have those conversations and you're like, you're doing this because you're son of, and oddly enough, he wasn't even Microvellum. So that was part of the conversation was, if you were to incorporate Microvellum into the mix, I see even more, increase. So yeah, I think that's a big part of the industry over the next couple of years.
So on the flip side, what do you see staying the same over the next 5 to 10 years in the industry?
Yeah, that's, like I said, it's kind of interesting how there's so much technology that's out there for woodwork. There's some CNCs and auto feeds and auto labeling and all this cool aspects of what's available. But what I find is some of the shops that, for me, because I'm seeing quite a few shops, first the shops I'm going into, they're kind of stuck 5 to 10 years in the past with their processes. And I think that's an unfortunate part of the industry because people are, they've got the job, they got to get it done. They have the means of which they've been using for the last 15, 20 years that they've been working, and they have enough figured in the cost of the job that they just keep plugging at what they've always done. And they're not getting out. They're not seeing what's available. They don't go. I've been the gentleman that I originally ended up going and interviewing with at my first company, who ended up buying the company. I've been trying to get him to come with me to an IWF or an AWFS for like the last 5 or 6 years. Cause I'm like, you don't realize what is out there until you get out there and look at it.
Right.
You can see the benefits, but these guys, I think the industry as a whole, and this is, part of the difficulties that I had when I first started my drafting company, but the industry as a whole is always trying to catch up or like always just so busy that they don't take a step back and see what else is available and is out there. And I think is, one of the things that unfortunately will stick with several years.
Right.
Yeah. And there's definitely a benefit in just taking a little bit of time and figuring out what else is out. Because in AutoCAD, right? There's things that would take us hours to do in AutoCAD. And I go, something's wrong with this. This doesn't make sense. Let me take a step back and figure it out. And lo and behold, you find a forum or you find somebody else who's experienced the same thing. And now the issue that you've had that's taken hours from you is now done in 5 minutes.
Right.
There's that in every aspect of business, not just AutoCAD, Microvellum and Bubble and, drafting or in laser measurement technology, that is always there, but you just be able to take a step back and find it.
Yeah. Awesome. You can still hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. I was concerned my mic came up. Yeah, it's something that is, I've totally unrelated, but I watch a lot of woodworking YouTube. And there's a lot of it now. A lot of people on there, but there's a lot of people that pick it up and then start making videos. And it's like they're learning how to do things for the first time while showing other people how to do it. And it frustrates me because I'm like, okay, there's so much information and content out there, but like, hey, I could just quickly learn. Somebody's already done this and learn from them. And then maybe I can spend my efforts figuring out something new on top of that. But it's like what you're saying, like, hey, okay, if people spend so much time doing the work rather than taking a little bit of time to step back and see what else is out there, has somebody else figured out a better way to do this? And then I can capitalize on that and say, okay, can I learn from the hundreds of years of people doing this? And then the last 20 years even of people using technology like we have today, and just getting out a little bit and learning from people. There's so many other ways that you could incorporate, as well as share what you've learned with other people.
Yeah. And that was actually one of the things that was pivotal for my drafting company was, everything's always about the red lines. It's not necessarily not getting the first submittals out.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, now the red line just came in and everything has changed. There's one cabinet changed an inch, and you know how it is in our industry. It's like, well, that 1 inch is not going to get divided over 15 cabinets and a pain in the butt. And, I would spend hours wasted away. And, sometimes it's inevitable, but I developed a whole system around not the first submittals, but around the change, so that I could take and I could incorporate and change very rapidly. And that's what, gave us a very large edge, I think. And that was, there was nobody out there telling me that was the answer. It was like,
right.
There's got to be a better way. And sometimes just take a step back and think about it, find out.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking time out to talk and share about your journey and your story, and about entrepreneurship and the businesses that you started. If people are interested in finding out more about Adam, about Dirig Design, about Advanced Dimensions or American Bubble Boy, what's the best way for them to reach out or to find out more information?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So LinkedIn, you can always connect with me on LinkedIn. Always go onto our website, dirigdesign.com, advanceddimensions.com. You can have americanbubbleboy.com. So take a look there. Give me a call, shoot me an email. We're here to help and solve problems.
Awesome. We'll include links to all those in our show notes for everybody to make it easy.
Cool.
And love to have you on again at some point in the future. Look forward to nothing else. I definitely will see you at IWF in Atlanta. We'll have a booth there as well. So
Cool.
It's always good having a conversation with you, Adam. Appreciate the work you do and for you sharing it with everybody.
Likewise, I appreciate you having me, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about my story.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam.
All right.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verify in Field.